The gunshot echoed across the dusty plains of Nevada like thunder on a clear day, sending a chill down Victoria Newman's spine as she clung desperately to the stagecoach's leather seat. The year was 1878, and what had begun as a routine journey to Tonopah had devolved into a nightmare of splintering wood and flying bullets. Through the small window, she glimpsed the bandits' bandanas pulled high over their faces, their horses kicking up clouds of amber dust as they circled the coach like wolves around wounded prey. "Your money or your lives." The leader's voice carried over the pounding of hooves and the cracking of the driver's whip. Victoria watched in horror as the elderly couple across from her fumbled for their meager savings, hands trembling. "Please," the old woman whispered, "it's all we have." The stagecoach lurched violently as a bullet found one of the horses. Victoria heard the driver curse, followed by a sickening thud as his body hit the ground. The bandits closed in, their laughter cold and cruel in the desert air. The old man beside her pulled her down as another shot splintered the wood above their heads. "When I say run, you run," he muttered, pressing his pocket watch into her hand. "My daughter lives in Tanapa. Find her. Tell her Jacob sent you." Before Victoria could protest, the stagecoach came to a grinding halt. The door was wrenched open, and rough hands reached inside, dragging the elderly couple out first. Victoria's heart hammered against her ribs as she clutched her small travel bag to her chest. When they grabbed her arm, she did the only thing she could think of. She bit down hard on the bandit's hand and bolted. "Get the girl." The leader's voice rang out behind her as Victoria's boots pounded against the packed earth. She ran blindly, the vast Nevada desert stretching before her. The sound of a horse's hooves closing in made her legs pump faster, but she knew it was futile. They would catch her, take everything, and leave her to the mercy of the wilderness. A gunshot cracked through the air and Victoria stumbled, certain she'd been hit. But the bullet hadn't been meant for her. When she dared to look back, she saw a lone rider intercepting the bandits, his rifle raised. 3 more shots followed in quick succession, and 2 of the bandits fell from their horses. "Circle back." The leader shouted, and the remaining men retreated, firing wildly as they disappeared into a cloud of dust. Victoria stood frozen, her chest heaving with exertion and fear. The lone rider approached slowly, his face obscured by the brim of his hat. As he drew closer, she saw a pair of piercing blue eyes studying her from a sun-weathered face. "You all right, miss?" His voice was low, with the slightest hint of a southern drawl. Victoria nodded mutely, still clutching Jacob's pocket watch. The stranger glanced over his shoulder at the retreating bandits. "They'll be back with more men." He extended his hand toward her. "Climb up." She hesitated only a moment before taking his outstretched hand, allowing him to pull her up onto his horse. Her arms wrapped instinctively around his waist as he spurred the animal forward. "Name's Cole Prescott," he said over his shoulder, his body warm and solid against hers. "And I reckon you're a long way from where you ought to be." Victoria held tighter as the horse picked up speed, the wind whipping her hair free from its pins. The stagecoach and the bandits grew smaller in the distance. She didn't know this man, this Cole Prescott, but as the desert blurred around them, she realized she had no choice but to trust him. After all, he had just saved her life. "Victoria Newman," she replied, her voice barely audible over the pounding hooves. "I was headed to Tanapa." Cole nodded once, his eyes scanning the horizon. "That's still a good day's ride from here. We'll need to stop at my place first." Those men know these parts better than most, and they don't take kindly to being crossed. As they rode away from the setting sun, Victoria clutched the pocket watch in one hand and Cole's jacket in the other. The stagecoach bandits had left her in the dust, But somehow, against all odds, she'd found safety in the arms of a stranger. What she didn't know was how completely this chance encounter would change the course of her life. Cole Prescott's place turned out to be a modest ranch nestled at the base of a rocky outcropping, with a small creek running along its eastern edge. By the time they arrived, the sun had dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of deep purple and gold. Victoria's limbs ached from the long ride, and her throat felt parched and raw from the desert dust. "It's not much," Cole said as he helped her down from the horse, his hands strong and sure at her waist. "But it's safe. The bandits don't usually venture this far off the main trails." Victoria took in the weathered wood of the cabin, the small corral where several horses grazed and the smoke curling from the stone chimney. "Someone's here," she noted, her body tensing. "That'll be Samuel," Cole replied, leading his horse toward the water trough. "He helps me run the place. Old army friend. You can trust him." The door to the cabin swung open, and a tall man with graying hair and a full beard stepped out, rifle in hand. His eyes narrowed as they fell on Victoria. "Didn't know we were expecting company," Samuel called, his voice gruff but not unfriendly. "We weren't," Cole answered, tying his horse to the post. "Miss Newman here had a run-in with the Larson gang. They hit the Tonopah stage." Samuel's expression darkened. "Again, that's the third this month. Marshall ain't doing nothing about it." "Marshall Henley's got his hands full with the mining disputes," Cole said, guiding Victoria toward the cabin with a gentle hand at the small of her back. "Besides, the Larsons pay him well to look the other way." Victoria stopped short, turning to face Cole. "You know who they are?" "The men who attacked the stage." Cole's blue eyes met hers, something unreadable passing through them. "Everyone round these parts knows the Larson gang. They've been terrorizing the stage route since the silver boom brought folks to Tanapa." He paused, his jaw tightening. "Their leader, Silas Larson, fancies himself some kind of outlaw king." "The elderly couple on the stage with me," Victoria said, the weight of guilt suddenly heavy in her chest. "I left them behind." Cole's expression softened. "There wasn't anything you could have done for them, Miss Newman. The Larsons don't usually kill unless they have to, but they take everything worth taking." Samuel cleared his throat. "You two can stand out here jowing all night, or you can come inside where it's warm. Got stew on the fire." The interior of the cabin was surprisingly cozy, with a stone hearth dominating one wall and rough-hewn furniture arranged throughout the single room. A ladder led to what Victoria assumed was a sleeping loft, and various hunting implements and tools hung from the walls. It smelled of wood smoke, coffee, and something savory that made her stomach growl in response. "Sit," Samuel instructed, gesturing to the table. "You look like you're about to fall over, miss." Victoria sank gratefully onto the bench, suddenly aware of how exhausted she truly was. Cole moved around the cabin with the ease of long familiarity, fetching bowls and spoons while Samuel ladled out portions of a thick stew. "What brings you to Tanapa?" Samuel asked as he set a steaming bowl in front of her. "Not many women travel these routes alone." Victoria wrapped her fingers around the warm bowl, drawing comfort from its heat. "I wasn't alone. I was traveling with an elderly couple, the Millers, Jacob and Martha. They were kind enough to take me under their wing." She swallowed hard, thinking of Jacob's pocket watch still clutched in her hand. "I'm a teacher. Was a teacher in Sacramento. The mining company hired me to start a school in Tonopah." Cole raised an eyebrow as he took the seat across from her. "Tonopa's a rough town for a schoolteacher." "I'm tougher than I look, Mr. Prescott," Victoria replied, lifting her chin slightly. "And children deserve education no matter where they live." A hint of a smile tugged at Cole's lips. "I don't doubt your toughness, Miss Newman. Anyone who can outrun the Larson gang, even for a spell, has got grit. They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes, the only sounds the clink of spoons against bowls and the occasional pop of the fire. Victoria found herself studying Cole when he wasn't looking, the way the firelight caught in his dark hair, the fine lines around his eyes that spoke of squinting into the sun, the capable hands that had both fired a rifle with deadly accuracy and treated her with gentle care. "You said you'd take me to Tanapa tomorrow," Victoria finally said, setting down her spoon. "I don't want to impose on your hospitality any longer than necessary." Cole exchanged a look with Samuel that Victoria couldn't quite interpret. "About that," he began, leaning forward on his elbows. "The Larsons won't take kindly to what happened today. They'll be watching the trails, especially the ones leading to Tonopah. It might be best if you stay here for a few days, at least until things cool down." "I can't," Victoria protested. "I'm expected at the mining office in 2 days. If I don't arrive, they'll give the position to someone else. I need this job, Mr. Prescott." "Cole," he corrected gently. "And I understand, but I'm not sure you realize how dangerous the Larsons can be. They don't like loose ends." Samuel stood, collecting the empty bowls. "What Cole's trying to say, miss, is that you're a witness. The Larsons don't leave witnesses." A chill ran through Victoria that had nothing to do with the night air seeping through the cabin walls. "You think they'd come after me? But why? I barely saw their faces." "Doesn't matter," Cole said, his voice low and serious. "Silas Larson's built his reputation on being thorough. Anyone who could identify his men, his methods, they're a threat." Victoria twisted Jacob's pocket watch in her hands, her mind racing. "What about Jacob's daughter?" "He told me to find her in Tanapa. She should know what happened to her parents." Cole rubbed a hand over his jaw, the sound of stubble rasping against his palm audible in the quiet cabin. "What's her name? Tanapa's not that big, we might know her." "I don't know," Victoria admitted. "Jacob just said his daughter lived there. He gave me this." She held out the pocket watch, its gold case gleaming in the firelight. Cole took it carefully, opening the case to reveal an inscription inside the lid. "To Jacob, with love eternal, Martha, this the couple you were traveling with." Victoria nodded, a lump forming in her throat. "Miller, you said their name was?" Samuel asked from where he stood by the hearth, pouring coffee into tin cups. "Yes, Jacob and Martha Miller." Samuel handed a cup to Victoria. "There's a woman in Tonopah, runs the boarding house near the assay office. Eleanor Miller. Could be her." "Eleanor," Victoria repeated, a small flame of hope kindling in her chest. "I need to tell her what happened, and I need to report to the mining office." "Mr. Prescott Cole, I appreciate your concern, but I can't hide away here while my future hangs in the balance." Cole studied her for a long moment, his blue eyes unreadable in the dim light. Finally, he sighed. "All right, but we do this my way. Samuel and I will both accompany you. We leave at first light, take the back trails. With luck, we'll make it to Tanapa by nightfall tomorrow." Relief flooded through Victoria. "Thank you. I don't know how I can repay you for your kindness." "No need," Cole said, rising from the table. "Just trying to do right by you, Miss Newman." "Victoria," she corrected with a small smile. "If I'm to call you Cole, then you must call me Victoria." Something flickered in Cole's eyes, something warm that made Victoria's heart beat a little faster. "Victoria, then," he agreed, her name sounding like something precious on his lips. Samuel cleared his throat loudly. "I'll take first watch. Cole, you can show Miss Victoria where she can sleep." Cole nodded, gesturing toward a curtained-off area in the corner of the cabin. "It's not much privacy, but it's the best we can offer." "It's more than enough," Victoria assured him, gathering her small travel bag. As she moved toward the makeshift room, exhaustion finally overtaking her, she paused to look back at Cole. "Thank you again, for everything." Cole's expression softened, and for a moment, Victoria caught a glimpse of something beneath the rugged exterior, a gentleness, a depth of feeling that called to something within her own heart. "Sleep well, Victoria. Tomorrow's going to be a long day." As she settled onto the narrow cot behind the curtain, Victoria found herself wondering about the mysterious cowboy who had come to her rescue. There was more to Cole Prescott than met the eye. She was certain of it. And despite the danger, despite the uncertainty of what awaited her in Tonopah, she found herself looking forward to discovering exactly what that might be. Dawn broke over the Nevada desert in a spectacular display of pinks and golds, painting the rugged landscape in soft, warm light. Victoria had risen before the sun, unable to sleep as her mind raced with thoughts of the journey ahead and the mysterious cowboy who had saved her life. She'd found a basin of water left outside her curtained area and had done her best to make herself presentable, though her traveling dress was dusty and wrinkled beyond salvaging. When she emerged, she found Cole already awake, checking his rifle by the light of an oil lamp. He glanced up at her approach, his eyes widening slightly as they took in her appearance. "You look," he began, then seemed to think better of whatever he'd been about to say. "Did you sleep well?" Victoria smoothed her hands over her skirt, acutely aware of how disheveled she must appear. "As well as could be expected given the circumstances. Thank you for asking." Cole nodded, returning his attention to his rifle. "Samuel's checking the trail. If it's clear, we'll head out within the hour. There's coffee on the stove and some biscuits if you're hungry." Victoria helped herself to the simple breakfast, watching Cole from the corner of her eye as he moved about the cabin with efficient, purposeful motions. There was something compelling about the way he carried himself, confident but not arrogant, capable but not showy. It was a stark contrast to the men she'd known in Sacramento with their fancy suits and practiced charm. "You've lived out here long?" she asked, breaking the silence that had settled between them. Cole paused, considering the question. "Going on 8 years now. Came west after the war." "Needed the space, I suppose." "The war," Victoria echoed, realization dawning. "You fought in the Civil War," a shadow crossed Cole's face. "Union cavalry. Samuel too, though we didn't know each other then. Met him afterward when we both signed on as scouts for the army out here." Victoria tried to calculate his age. If he'd fought in the war, he had to be at least in his mid-30s, though he didn't look much older than her own 24 years. "That must have been difficult," she said softly, thinking of the stories she'd heard, the broken men who'd returned from battlefields both physically and spiritually wounded. "It was a lifetime ago," Cole replied, his tone making it clear the subject was closed. "What about you? What brings a schoolteacher from Sacramento all the way out to Tanapa?" Victoria sipped her coffee, grateful for the change of subject. "My father passed away last year. He was also a teacher, and after he died, the school board, well, they made it clear they preferred a male instructor." She kept her voice even, though the memory still stung. "When I saw the advertisement for a teacher in Tonopah, it seemed like an opportunity. A fresh start." Cole's expression was unreadable. "Tonopah's not exactly what I'd call civilized." The silver strike brought all kinds: miners, gamblers, women of a certain profession. Not many families yet, though that's changing. Still, it's a rough place for a woman alone. "As I said yesterday, Mr. Prescott, I'm tougher than I look." Victoria met his gaze steadily. "And I'm not afraid of hard work or hard places." A hint of a smile touched Cole's lips. "I'm beginning to see that." The door swung open, admitting Samuel along with a gust of cool morning air. "Trail's clear for now," he reported, stomping dust from his boots. "But we should move quick." Storms brewing to the west, and not just the weather kind. Cole's expression turned serious. Larson's, Samuel nodded grimly. Saw signs of riders heading toward town. At least 5, maybe more. They're taking the main trail, which means they're not hiding. Bold move, Cole muttered, strapping his rifle to his saddle. That means they've got the marshal in their pocket for sure. Victoria felt a chill despite the growing warmth of the day. Does that mean we can't go to Tonopah after all? It means we need to be careful, Cole answered, grabbing his hat from a peg by the door. We'll take the long way around, come in from the north. It'll add a few hours to the journey, but it's safer. They packed quickly, loading provisions and weapons onto their horses. Victoria was given a sturdy mare that Cole assured her was gentle but swift. As they prepared to depart, Cole approached with something draped over his arm. "You might want this," he said, holding out a worn leather jacket. Desert gets cold when the sun goes down, and that dress won't offer much protection. Victoria accepted the jacket gratefully, slipping it on over her dress. It was far too large, the sleeves hanging past her fingertips, but it smelled of leather and wood smoke and something uniquely Cole. "Thank you." He helped her mount, his hands strong and sure at her waist. Their eyes met as he stepped back, and Victoria felt a flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with anxiety about the journey ahead. "Stay close," Cole instructed, swinging up onto his own horse with easy grace. "If there's trouble, you ride hard and don't look back." "Understand," Victoria nodded, though she silently resolved not to abandon these men who had shown her such kindness. They rode out as the sun crested the eastern mountains, the day promising to be clear and hot. Samuel took the lead, with Victoria in the middle and Cole bringing up the rear, his eyes constantly scanning the horizon. The landscape was both beautiful and harsh, a contradiction that Victoria found oddly appealing. Rocky outcroppings gave way to stretches of sagebrush and scrub, with distant mountains providing a dramatic backdrop. Despite the circumstances, she couldn't help but be moved by the wild grandeur of it all. They rode in silence for the most part, stopping only briefly to rest the horses and take water. By midday, the sun was high and merciless, beating down on them with relentless intensity. Victoria's skin felt tight and hot despite the wide-brimmed hat Cole had insisted she wear. "How much further?" she asked during one of their brief stops, her throat dry despite the water she'd just consumed. "Another few hours," Samuel replied, scanning the horizon with narrowed eyes. "We're skirting wide around the usual trails." Cole handed her a strip of dried meat. "Eat, you'll need your strength." Victoria accepted it gratefully, watching as Cole moved to the crest of a small rise, his posture alert and wary. There was something compelling about the way he moved, a natural confidence that spoke of a man comfortable in his own skin and in this harsh environment. "How did you two end up out here?" she asked Samuel, curiosity getting the better of her. "Cole mentioned you were scouts for the army, but—" Samuel gave her a sidelong glance, his weathered face inscrutable. "That's Cole's story to tell if he chooses. But I will say this, he's a good man, one of the best I've known. Whatever he's running from, it doesn't change that." Before Victoria could question him further, Cole returned, his expression grim. "Riders coming from the east, 4, maybe 5, moving fast." Samuel was on his feet in an instant. "Larson's? Can't tell from this distance, but it doesn't matter. We can't risk it." Cole turned to Victoria, his eyes intense. "Time to move. Stay close, and if I tell you to run, you run. No arguments." They mounted quickly, abandoning the rest stop without looking back. Cole led them into a narrow ravine, the horses picking their way carefully over loose rock and gravel. Victoria's heart pounded in her chest, fear and exhilaration mingling in a heady rush. She kept her eyes fixed on Cole's broad shoulders ahead of her, drawing strength from his calm, confident presence. The ravine opened into a small box canyon, the walls rising steep and sheer on three sides. Cole cursed under his breath, pulling his horse to a stop. "Dead end," Samuel muttered, his hand moving to the rifle strapped to his saddle. Cole turned his horse, scanning the canyon walls with narrowed eyes. "There," he said, pointing to a narrow cleft in the rock face. "That might lead through to the other side." They dismounted, leading the horses toward the opening. It was barely wide enough for a horse to pass through, but as they squeezed into the shadowy passage, Victoria saw that it did indeed cut through the canyon wall, twisting and turning before emerging on the other side. The relief was short-lived. As they exited the narrow pass, the sound of hoofbeats echoed across the rocky terrain. 5 riders appeared on the ridge above them, silhouetted against the bright blue sky. "There they are," one of the men shouted, pointing down at them. Cole's reaction was immediate. He grabbed Victoria around the waist, practically throwing her onto her horse before vaulting onto his own. "Ride," he commanded, spurring his mount forward. "Samuel, take the lead." They thundered across the open ground, heading for the cover of a distant stand of trees. Victoria bent low over her horse's neck, her heart in her throat as bullets kicked up dust around them. She risked a glance back to see Cole hanging slightly behind, his rifle raised as he fired off shots to cover their retreat. One of the pursuing riders fell, tumbling from his saddle in a cloud of dust. The others pulled back, seeking cover behind rocks as Cole continued to fire. "Cole!" Victoria screamed as a bullet whizzed past her ear, terrifyingly close. "Keep going." He shouted back, his face set in grim determination. They reached the trees, the dense growth providing some protection from the gunfire. Samuel pulled his horse up short, turning to provide covering fire as Cole galloped to join them. "They're persistent," Samuel growled, reloading his rifle with practiced ease. "They're Larsons, all right," Cole confirmed, his breathing heavy. "Recognized Jeb and the youngest brother, Marcus." Victoria's hands trembled on the reins, adrenaline coursing through her veins. "What do we do now?" Cole glanced at the sky, where dark clouds were gathering to the west. "We keep moving. There's an old line shack about 5 miles north of here. We can hole up there until dark, then make our final push to Tonopah." The sound of approaching riders spurred them into motion once more. They plunged deeper into the trees, following a faint game trail that wound through the undergrowth. The going was slow and treacherous, branches whipping at their faces and roots threatening to trip the horses. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, the trees thinned, revealing a vast expanse of open country. In the distance, Victoria could make out a small structure the line shack Cole had mentioned. "Almost there," Cole encouraged, his voice tight with tension. They had just cleared the tree line when the crack of a rifle echoed across the open space. Samuel's horse screamed, a terrible sound that turned Victoria's blood to ice and went down hard, throwing its rider to the ground. "Samuel!" Cole wheeled his horse around, galloping back to where his friend lay motionless on the hard, packed earth. Victoria hesitated only a moment before following. She couldn't leave them, not after everything they'd done for her. She reached Samuel's side just as Cole was checking for a pulse, his face ashen. "Is he?" She couldn't bring herself to finish the question. "He's alive," Cole said, relief evident in his voice. "Knocked out cold, but alive. His horse took the bullet, poor beast." The sound of approaching riders grew louder. Cole's expression hardened as he made a quick decision. "Help me get him onto my horse. You'll have to ride double." Together, they managed to hoist Samuel's unconscious form onto Cole's mount. Cole swung up behind him, keeping his friend secure with one arm while holding the reins with the other. "Your horse won't carry 3, Victoria protested, realizing what he intended. "No," Cole agreed grimly. "That's why you're taking yours and riding for that shack as fast as you can. I'll cover you, then follow." "I won't leave you," Victoria insisted, her fear now eclipsed by a fierce determination not to abandon this man who had risked everything for her. Cole's eyes softened for just a moment, something passing between them that made Victoria's heart skip. "I'm not asking, Victoria. Go, I'll be right behind you." Before she could argue further, the first of the riders broke from the tree line. Cole fired, his shot finding its mark. Another rider fell, but the remaining 3 kept coming. "Go," Cole shouted, firing again. This time Victoria obeyed. She spurred her horse forward, bending low over its neck as they galloped across the open ground toward the distant shack. Behind her, she could hear the crack of Cole's rifle, the answering fire from the pursuers, the pounding of hooves. The line shack grew larger as she approached, a simple wooden structure that had clearly seen better days. She reached it in minutes that felt like hours, practically falling from her horse in her haste to get to cover. The door hung askew on rusted hinges, opening with a groan when she pushed against it. The interior was dusty and abandoned, containing little more than a crude table, a couple of broken chairs, and a rusted stove. But it had walls and a roof, and right now, that was all that mattered. Victoria peered through a grimy window, her heart in her throat as she searched for Cole. At first, she saw nothing but empty landscape. Then, movement caught her eye: Cole's horse, running hard across the open ground with its double burden. Behind him, the 3 remaining riders were in hot pursuit, gaining ground with every stride. Victoria grabbed the rifle that hung over the door, checking to find it loaded. She'd never fired a gun before, but her father had taught her the basic principles. Taking a deep breath, she positioned herself at the window, sighting down the barrel as Cole had shown her during their brief weapons lesson the night before. Cole was close now, maybe 100 yards out. The Larson gang was closing in, one of them raising a rifle to take aim at Cole's back. Victoria steadied her hands, exhaled slowly, and pulled the trigger. The rifle bucked against her shoulder, nearly knocking her off balance. Her shot went wide, kicking up dust far to the left of her target, but it was enough to startle the would-be shooter, making his own shot go wild. Cole glanced toward the shack, his expression a mixture of surprise and something that might have been pride. He redoubled his efforts, spurring his exhausted horse toward the relative safety of the line shack. Victoria fired again and again, not hitting anything but keeping the pursuers' heads down long enough for Cole to reach the shack. He dismounted in a fluid motion, pulling Samuel down with him and dragging his still unconscious friend through the door that Victoria held open. "Get down," Cole ordered, pushing her away from the window as bullets splintered the wooden frame. He positioned himself at the window, returning fire with much greater accuracy than Victoria had managed. Outside, one of the Larson men cried out, clutching his arm as he retreated. "2 left," Cole muttered, reloading his rifle with practiced efficiency. "And they're smart enough to know when they're outgunned." Sure enough, the remaining riders had pulled back, taking shelter behind a rocky outcropping some distance from the shack. "Are they leaving?" Victoria asked, hope rising in her chest. Cole shook his head grimly. "Just regrouping. They'll wait for dark, then try to flush us out." He turned to check on Samuel, who was beginning to stir on the dusty floor. "How's your head, old friend?" Samuel groaned, reaching up to touch a nasty gash on his temple. "Feels like I got kicked by a mule. What happened?" "Your horse took a bullet, threw you hard," Cole explained, helping Samuel into a sitting position. "You've been out cold for the past half hour." Samuel's eyes widened as memory returned. The Larsons, still out there. 2 of them, maybe 3 if the one Victoria winged isn't hurt too badly. Samuel's gaze shifted to Victoria, surprise evident in his weathered features. "You shot one of them." Victoria felt her cheeks warm. "I don't think I actually hit him, but I tried to help." "She did more than try," Cole said, his voice warm with approval. "Kept them off our backs long enough for us to make it here." Outside, the sky was darkening rapidly, both from the setting sun and the approaching storm. Thunder rumbled in the distance, a promise of rain that would normally be welcome in this parched landscape, but now only added to their troubles. "What's the plan?" Samuel asked, wincing as he tried to stand. Cole helped him to one of the broken chairs, which creaked ominously under his weight. Cole moved back to the window, scanning the darkening landscape with narrowed eyes. "We're about 10 miles from Tonopah. In good conditions, we could make it in a couple of hours, but with only 2 horses, 1 injured man, and the Larsons on our tail. Not to mention that storm rolling in," Samuel added, gesturing toward the window where lightning now flickered on the horizon. Victoria hugged Cole's jacket tighter around her shoulders, the reality of their situation sinking in. They were trapped in a dilapidated shack with limited ammunition, facing determined enemies and worsening weather. And somehow, it was all because of her, because Cole had chosen to help her when the stagecoach was attacked. "I'm sorry," she said suddenly, her voice small in the dusty silence. "This is all my fault. If you hadn't stopped to help me yesterday, don't." Cole's voice was firm but gentle. "The Larsons and I have history that predates you, Victoria. This was always going to come to a head sooner or later." Victoria frowned, puzzled by this revelation. "What do you mean, you have history?" Cole and Samuel exchanged a look loaded with meaning. Finally, Cole sighed, running a hand through his dust-streaked hair. "The Larson gang hasn't always operated around Tanapa," he began, his voice low and measured. "They started farther north, near Virginia City. 5 years ago, they robbed a bank there. A woman was killed, a young mother who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time." Victoria's breath caught in her throat, a sick feeling of premonition settling in her stomach. "Who was she?" Cole's blue eyes met hers, filled with a grief that time had dulled but never erased. "My sister, Celia Prescott Davis. She left behind a husband and a 3-year-old son." "Cole," Victoria whispered, her heart breaking for him, "I'm so sorry." He nodded once, accepting her sympathy with quiet dignity. "After it happened, I tracked the Larsons for months, finally caught up with them near Carson City. There was a shootout. I wounded Silas, killed his oldest brother Thomas, the others got away. And Silas Larson has been looking for payback ever since," Samuel finished grimly. "When the gang moved their operation to the Tonopah area, Cole and I decided it was time to settle things once and for all." Victoria's mind raced, pieces falling into place. "That's why you have this ranch so close to their territory. You've been watching them, waiting for a chance to bring them to justice." "Justice," Cole repeated, a bitter smile twisting his lips. "The law won't touch them. Too many paid-off officials, too many witnesses who conveniently forget what they saw. No, what I want isn't justice. It's revenge." The raw honesty in his voice sent a shiver down Victoria's spine. This was a side of Cole Prescott she hadn't glimpsed before, a darkness, a wound that had never properly healed. "And now they have us trapped," she said softly, glancing toward the window where night had finally fallen, bringing with it the first heavy drops of rain. "Because you stopped to help me." Cole's expression softened as he looked at her. "I don't regret that, Victoria, not for a moment. Something passed between them then, a current of understanding and connection that transcended their brief acquaintance." Victoria felt her heart quicken, her breath catching in her throat. Despite the danger, despite the uncertainty of their situation, she knew with sudden clarity that meeting Cole Prescott had changed something fundamental within her. The moment was broken by a flash of lightning, illuminating the interior of the shack in harsh white light. Thunder followed almost immediately, the storm now directly overhead. "They'll use the storm for cover," Samuel warned, checking his weapon. "Come in when the thunder's loudest, hoping we won't hear them." Cole nodded, his expression shifting back to grim determination. "Victoria, I want you to take that back corner. Stay low, keep your head down. Samuel, can you cover the rear window?" Samuel tested his weight on his injured leg, grimacing but nodding. "I can manage." As they took their positions, the rain increased, drumming on the roof with growing intensity. Victoria clutched the rifle Cole had given her, trying to control her trembling hands. She was afraid, yes, but there was also a strange exhilaration in knowing that she was fighting alongside Cole and Samuel, not simply waiting to be rescued. The next hour passed in tense silence, broken only by the crash of thunder and the constant patter of rain. Victoria's eyes strained in the darkness, trying to pierce the gloom outside the grimy windows. Each flash of lightning revealed only empty landscape, yet she knew the Larson men were out there, waiting, planning when the attack came. It was swift and violent. A bottle crashed through one of the windows, flames erupting as the makeshift torch ignited the dry wood of the floor. Almost simultaneously, gunfire erupted from multiple directions, bullets splintering the walls and windows. "Fire!" Cole shouted, moving quickly to stamp out the flames. "Samuel, watch that door." Victoria fired toward the muzzle flashes she could see through the broken window, the rifle's recoil bruising her shoulder. She had no idea if she hit anything, but she kept firing, determined to do her part. The door burst open, a shadowy figure silhouetted against the stormy night. Samuel fired, the intruder staggering but not falling. Cole whirled, his own gun barking twice. The man went down with a cry that was lost in a crash of thunder. "One down," Cole called, moving to secure the door. "At least one more out there." Victoria was reloading when she heard a noise at the window beside her, the scrape of boot against wood. She looked up to see a bearded face peering in, eyes widening in surprise at finding her there. Without thinking, she swung the rifle like a club, catching the man across the face. He fell back with a howl of pain. "Victoria!" Cole was at her side in an instant, firing through the window at the retreating figure. "Are you hurt?" "No," she gasped, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. "I'm fine. I hit him with the rifle." A grim smile touched Cole's lips. "That you did. Remind me never to get on your bad side." The momentary lightness faded as another volley of shots peppered the shack, one bullet passing so close to Victoria's head that she felt the displacement of air. Cole pulled her down, shielding her with his body as splinters of wood rained down around them. "This isn't working," he muttered, his breath warm against her ear. "They've got us pinned down, and sooner or later one of those fire bottles is going to take hold." As if to emphasize his point, another flaming missile crashed through a window, this one landing dangerously close to a pile of old rags in the corner. Samuel moved to extinguish it, cursing as a bullet grazed his arm. "We need to get out of here," Victoria said, the reality of their situation sinking in. "But how? They're all around us." Cole's eyes met hers in the darkness, a decision forming. "I'm going to draw them off. When I do, you and Samuel make for the horses. Ride hard for Tonopah, don't stop for anything." "No," Victoria grabbed his arm, panic rising in her throat. "That's suicide, Cole. There has to be another way." "She's right," Samuel called from his position by the rear window. "Bad plan, Cole, we stick together." Cole's jaw tightened, frustration evident in the tense line of his shoulders. "Then what do you suggest? We're outgunned and outnumbered." A moment of tense silence followed, broken only by the continuing storm outside. Then, unexpectedly, Victoria began to laugh, a soft, almost hysterical sound that made both men look at her with concern. "What's so funny?" Cole asked, clearly worried she'd reached her breaking point. Victoria gestured toward the window, where the rain continued to pour down in sheets. "We're not outgunned," she said, an idea taking shape in her mind. "We're just fighting the wrong way. They expect us to stay in here trapped like rats. What if we didn't?" Cole frowned, not following her train of thought. "You want to charge out there into open gunfire?" "No." Victoria pointed to the ceiling, where rain was beginning to seep through in several places. "I want to use the storm. They can't see any better than we can in this weather, and the thunder will mask our movements. If we slip out the back, stay low, we might be able to circle around behind them." A slow smile spread across Cole's face as he caught her meaning. "Turn the tables, make the hunters into the hunted," Samuel chuckled softly. "I like the way she thinks, Cole." "So do I," Cole murmured, his eyes never leaving Victoria's face. Something in his gaze made her heart flutter despite the danger surrounding them. "It's risky, but it's our best shot. Samuel, can you move well enough to make it work?" Samuel tested his injured leg, wincing but nodding. "Don't you worry about me. I've fought through worse." They worked quickly, gathering their limited supplies and checking their weapons. The plan was simple but dangerous: exit through the rear window during a particularly loud burst of thunder, circle around the shack, and approach the Larson men from behind. "Ready?" Cole asked, his hand on Victoria's shoulder as they crouched beneath the back window. She nodded, fear and determination warring within her. The next crash of thunder shook the small building. "Now," Cole whispered, helping Samuel through the window first, then Victoria. He followed close behind, the three of them crouching in the mud as rain pounded down around them. They moved like shadows through the stormy night, using the darkness and the weather as cover. Victoria's heart pounded so loudly she was certain the Larson gang would hear it, even over the storm. Her dress was soaked through within seconds, Cole's leather jacket providing minimal protection against the deluge. Cole led them in a wide arc around the shack, his movements sure despite the difficult conditions. Victoria followed closely, grateful for his steady presence ahead of her. Samuel brought up the rear, his limp more pronounced but his determination unwavering. They had nearly completed their circle when Cole suddenly raised a hand, signaling them to stop. Through the curtain of rain, Victoria could make out two figures huddled behind a large boulder, rifles trained on the shack they had just abandoned. Cole pointed to himself, then to the figure on the left. He gestured to Samuel, then to the right-hand figure. His message was clear. They would take them together on his signal. Victoria held her breath, acutely aware that lives hung in the balance, not just theirs, but those of the men who had attacked them. Despite everything, she found herself hoping it wouldn't come to killing. Cole waited for the next lightning flash, then raised his hand. As thunder rolled across the landscape, he and Samuel moved as one, emerging from the darkness with weapons raised. "Drop your guns," Cole's voice cut through the storm with commanding clarity. "It's over, Larsons." The two men spun in surprise, clearly not expecting an attack from behind. One of them, younger, with a patchy beard and wild eyes, immediately raised his rifle. "No!" Victoria's cry was lost in the crack of gunfire. The young Larson fell backward, Cole's bullet finding its mark with deadly accuracy. The other man, older, with a face like weathered leather, slowly raised his hands, his rifle falling to the mud at his feet. "Jeb Larson," Cole said, approaching cautiously with his gun still trained on the surrendering man. "Where's your brother?" Jeb's eyes darted between Cole and Samuel, calculation evident in his gaze. "Marcus is dead thanks to you, shot him back at the shack." "And Silas?" Cole pressed, his voice hard. "Where's he in all this?" A slow, ugly smile spread across Jeb Larson's face. "Waiting for you in Tonopah, Prescott. He figured you'd head there eventually. Got a nice welcome planned." Victoria felt a chill that had nothing to do with her wet clothes. Silas Larson, the man who had killed Cole's sister, was waiting for them in the very town she needed to reach. Cole's expression remained impassive, but Victoria saw the muscle ticking in his jaw. "Samuel, tie him up. We'll take him with us, turn him over to whatever passes for law in Tanapa." "And then what?" Victoria asked quietly as Samuel secured Jeb's hands with a length of rope. "You'll face Silas." Cole's eyes met hers, the intensity in them making her breath catch. "I've been waiting 5 years to face Silas Larson. One way or another, it ends in Tonopah." The storm was beginning to abate, the thunder moving off to the east as they gathered their horses and prepared to leave. The line shack stood empty behind them, bullet holes in its walls the only evidence of the battle that had taken place. With Jeb Larson securely tied and mounted on the same horse as Samuel, they set off toward Tonopah. The rain had stopped completely by the time the first lights of the mining town appeared on the horizon, glowing faintly in the pre-dawn darkness. Victoria rode beside Cole, their pace steady but cautious. Despite the exhaustion that pulled at her limbs, her mind was racing with thoughts of what awaited them in Tanapa. Not just Silas Larson and his vendetta against Cole, but her own future, the teaching position she had traveled so far to claim, Jacob Miller's daughter who deserved to know what had happened to her parents. And then there was Cole himself. In the span of 2 days, he had become more important to her than she could have imagined possible. The thought of him facing Silas Larson, of the danger that awaited him, made her heart constrict painfully. "Cole," she began hesitantly, keeping her voice low to avoid being overheard by Samuel and their prisoner. "When we reach Tonopah, what will you do?" He didn't answer immediately, his gaze fixed on the town ahead. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet but determined. "What I came here to do 5 years ago. End this, one way or another." Victoria swallowed hard, fear for him rising like a tide within her. "And after? What then?" Cole turned to look at her then, his expression softening in a way that made her heart skip a beat. "I haven't thought much about after. Never seemed like there would be one, not until." He trailed off, but his eyes held hers, conveying what he couldn't bring himself to say. "Until what?" Victoria pressed, needing to hear the words. A small, almost shy smile touched Cole's lips. "Until I saw a schoolteacher running from bandits, with more courage than sense and a determination that put most men to shame." Heat rushed to Victoria's cheeks that had nothing to do with the rising sun. Before she could respond, Samuel called from behind them, "Riders coming." 3 of them moving fast. Cole's expression immediately hardened as he scanned the approaching figures. "It's not the Larsons. Looks like a town posse." He turned to Victoria, his voice urgent. "When we meet them, let me do the talking. Tonopa's a small town, and strangers aren't always welcome, especially ones bringing trouble." Victoria nodded, her heart pounding as the riders drew closer. They were indeed a posse of sorts, 3 men with badges pinned to their vests, rifles held ready as they approached. "That's far enough," the leader called, a grizzled man with a thick mustache and hard eyes. "State your business in Tanapa." Cole raised his hand slightly, showing he meant no harm. "Name's Cole Prescott. This is Samuel Tucker and Miss Victoria Newman." Miss Newman was on yesterday's stage to Tonopah when it was attacked by the Larson gang. We're bringing her into town, along with one of the Larsons who tried to finish the job." The deputy's eyes narrowed as they took in Jeb Larson, bound and sullen on the horse behind Samuel. "Heard about the stage getting hit. Marshall sent us out to look for survivors." His gaze shifted to Victoria. "You the school teacher they were expecting?" Victoria straightened in her saddle, determined to appear composed despite her bedraggled state. "I am. I'm to report to Mr. Hargrove at the mining company office." Something like respect flickered in the deputy's eyes. "Well, you're a sight more resilient than most of the folks they send out here, Miss. Hargrove figured you were dead when you didn't arrive on schedule." "Is there a woman named Alina Miller in town?" Victoria asked, remembering Jacob's dying request. "I have news for her regarding her parents." The deputy nodded slowly. "Alina runs the boarding house on Pine Street, decent place if you're looking for lodgings." He turned his attention back to Cole. "As for you, Prescott, Marshall Henley's been asking about you. Word is you and Silas Larson have unfinished business." Cole's expression remained neutral, but Victoria saw his knuckles whiten on the reins. "That's between me and Silas. All I'm doing is bringing Miss Newman safely to town and turning in Jeb Larson for the stage robbery." The deputy considered this for a long moment, then jerked his head toward Tanapa. "All right, but I'm warning you keep your business with Silas out of my town. We've got enough trouble without adding to it." With that, the posse fell in around them, escorting them into Tonopah as the sun crested the eastern mountains, bathing the dusty mining town in golden light. Tanapa in 1878 was a town in transition, no longer just a rough mining camp, but not yet a civilized settlement. The main street was lined with a mix of hastily constructed wooden buildings and more substantial structures of stone and brick. The constant activity of the silver mines formed a backdrop of noise and motion, with ore carts rattling along narrow gauge rails and the steady rhythm of stamp mills echoing through the valley. Victoria took it all in with wide eyes as they rode down the main thoroughfare. Despite the early hour, the town was already bustling with activity, miners heading to their shifts, shopkeepers opening for business, women hanging laundry between buildings. It was both smaller and larger than she had imagined, a contradiction that seemed to define much of the West. They stopped first at the marshal's office, a squat stone building near the center of town. Marshal Henley proved to be a heavyset man with calculating eyes and a manner that immediately put Victoria on edge. He listened to their account of the Stagecoach robbery and subsequent events with an expression of practiced concern, but she noticed that his eyes kept straying to Cole with something like wariness. "Well, Miss Newman, you've had quite the adventure," Henley said when they had finished their tale. "Fortunate for you that Mr. Prescott happened along when he did." "Yes, quite fortunate," Victoria agreed, not missing the skepticism in the marshal's tone. "Will you be sending men to look for the other passengers? The Millers, they were elderly, and I fear what may have become of them." Henley's expression softened slightly. "Already sent a patrol out yesterday when the stage didn't arrive on schedule. Found the coach abandoned about 20 miles east of here. No sign of the passengers, though we did find the driver. He didn't make it." He glanced at Jeb Larson, who sat sullenly in a corner of the office, hands still bound. "If the Larsons took the Millers, there's a good chance they're still alive. Silas usually holds hostages for ransom." Victoria felt a surge of hope at this news. "Then we must find them. Perhaps Jeb knows where they're being held." "We'll question him," Henley assured her, though his tone lacked conviction. "Now, I understand you're here to take up the teaching position." Victoria nodded, suddenly remembering her purpose in coming to Tanapa. Yes, I'm to report to Mr. Hargrove at the mining company. Better get to it then. Hargrove's not a patient man. Henley turned his attention to Cole, his expression hardening. As for you, Prescott, I hear Silas Larson's in town. Word is he's staying at the Silver Spur Saloon. Now, I don't want any trouble, wouldn't dream of causing you trouble, Marshal, Cole interrupted, his voice deceptively mild. I'm just here to see Miss Newman safely settled, then I'll be on my way. Victoria shot him a sharp glance, knowing full well he had no intention of leaving Tonopah until he had confronted Silas Larson. Cole met her gaze steadily, a silent communication passing between them that both worried and thrilled her. See that you do, Henley said, clearly not believing Cole any more than Victoria did. Tanapah's growing into a respectable town. Can't have gunplay in the streets like some wild frontier outpost. They left the marshal's office a short time later, stepping back into the bright morning sunlight. Samuel had remained behind, ostensibly to give a more detailed statement about the Larson gang's activities, but really, Victoria suspected, to keep an eye on Jeb Larson and ensure the marshal didn't simply let him go. You're not really leaving, are you? Victoria asked as they walked toward the mining company office, Cole carrying her small travel bag. He glanced down at her, his expression softening. No, not until I finish what I came to do. He paused, then added more gently, but first, I'm going to make sure you're properly settled. Your safety comes first, Victoria. The sincerity in his voice made her heart flutter. And what about your safety? Silas Larson sounds dangerous. A grim smile touched Cole's lips. He is, but so am I when I need to be. They reached the mining company office, a substantial building with large windows and a polished wooden door. Victoria hesitated before entering, suddenly anxious about her appearance. After 2 days of hard travel, a gunfight and a rainstorm, she was hardly presentable for a professional meeting. Cole seemed to read her thoughts. You look fine, he assured her, though his eyes held a warmth that suggested he found her more than just fine. Besides, given what you've been through to get here, Hargrove should be impressed by your determination if nothing else. Victoria took a deep breath and straightened her shoulders. Thank you, Cole, for everything. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come along when you did. I'm glad I did, he said simply, his blue eyes holding hers for a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity. The meeting with Hargrove went better than Victoria had dared hope. The mining company superintendent, a barrel-chested man with a booming voice and a surprisingly gentle manner, was indeed impressed by her perseverance in reaching Tanapa despite the Stagecoach robbery. Shows character, coming all this way and facing down bandits, he declared, signing the papers that officially hired her as Tonopah's first schoolteacher. And character's what we need in someone shaping young minds. The school, he informed her, was still under construction but would be ready within 2 weeks. In the meantime, she could use a room at the boarding house for temporary classes if she wished. Her own accommodations would be a small house behind the schoolhouse, but until that was completed, the mining company would pay for her room at Eleanor Miller's establishment. Eleanor's a good woman, Hargrove added as they concluded their business. Lost her husband in a mine collapse 2 years back. Running the boarding house keeps her going. She'll look after you. Victoria thanked him, clutching her employment papers with a sense of accomplishment. Despite everything, the robbery, the pursuit, the danger, she had achieved what she set out to do. She was now officially the schoolteacher of Tanapa. Cole was waiting outside, leaning against a hitching post with the easy grace that seemed to characterize his every movement. He straightened as she emerged, a questioning look in his eyes. It's official, she told him, unable to keep the smile from her face. I'm to start as soon as possible, even though the schoolhouse isn't quite finished yet. Congratulations, Schoolmarm Newman, Cole said, his own smile warm and genuine. Tonopah's children are lucky to have you. Victoria's cheeks warmed at the compliment. Now I just need to find Alina Miller. I still haven't delivered Jacob's message. Cole's expression grew serious. That won't be easy, telling her about her parents. Do you want me to come with you? The offer touched Victoria deeply. Despite his own pressing business with Silas Larson, Cole was still thinking of her needs. Yes, she admitted. I would appreciate that very much. They found the boarding house easily enough, a 3-story building with a wide porch and neat curtains in the windows. A sign hanging from the eaves proclaimed it Miller's Lodging House, clean rooms, honest rates. A bell tinkled as they entered, announcing their presence. The interior was surprisingly elegant for a frontier town, with polished floors, comfortable furniture, and the scent of baking bread in the air. A woman emerged from a back room, wiping her hands on her apron. She was perhaps 40, with graying auburn hair pulled back in a neat bun and kind eyes that crinkled at the corners. "Welcome to Miller's," she said warmly. "I'm Alina Miller. Are you looking for rooms?" Victoria stepped forward, Jacob's pocket watch clutched tightly in her hand. "Actually, Mrs. Miller, I'm Victoria Newman, the new schoolteacher, and yes, I will need a room, but that's not why I'm here." Alina's smile faltered slightly, sensing the gravity in Victoria's tone. "What is it, dear? Has something happened?" Victoria took a deep breath, drawing strength from Cole's solid presence beside her. "Mrs. Miller, I was on the Stagecoach yesterday, traveling with an elderly couple, Jacob and Martha Miller. Your parents, I believe." Alina's face paled, one hand rising to her throat. "Yes, they were visiting me. They were supposed to arrive yesterday, but when they didn't." Her voice trailed off, eyes filling with fear. "What happened? The stage was attacked by bandits," Victoria explained gently. "Your parents were taken. But there's reason to believe they're alive. The marshal said the Larson gang often holds hostages for ransom." Alina sank into a nearby chair, her legs seemingly unable to support her any longer. "The Larsons," she whispered, the name clearly familiar to her. "They've been terrorizing the stages for months now. We captured one of them," Cole spoke up, his voice steady and reassuring. "Jeb Larson. He's at the marshal's office now. If anyone knows where your parents are being held, it's him." Alina looked up at Cole, noticing him properly for the first time. "And who might you be, sir?" "Cole Prescott, madam. I happened upon the stage robbery and was able to help Miss Newman escape." Victoria heard the careful editing in Cole's explanation but didn't correct him. Instead, she stepped forward and placed Jacob's pocket watch in Alina's trembling hands. "Your father asked me to give you this. He wanted you to know they were thinking of you." Tears spilled down Alina's cheeks as she cradled the watch. "Papa's prized possession," she murmured. "He's had it since before I was born." She looked up at Victoria, determination replacing some of the fear in her eyes. "We have to find them." "We will," Cole promised, his voice carrying such conviction that Victoria found herself believing it completely. "I give you my word, Mrs. Miller. We'll bring your parents home safely." Alina studied him for a long moment, as if taking his measure. Whatever she saw in Cole's steady gaze seemed to reassure her, for she nodded once, decisively. "I believe you will, Mr. Prescott." She rose from the chair, straightening her apron with hands that trembled only slightly. "Now, Miss Newman needs a room, and you both look like you could use a hot meal and perhaps a bath. Consider yourselves my guests until this is resolved." Victoria started to protest. She had the mining company's voucher for her room, but Alina waved her objections away. "I insist. It's the least I can do for the woman who carried my father's message to me, and the man who's promised to bring my parents home. After the hardships of the past 2 days, the simple comforts of Eleanor Miller's boarding house seemed like unimaginable luxury to Victoria. A hot bath, clean clothes borrowed from Eleanor, who was close enough in size, and a meal of roast chicken, fresh bread, and garden vegetables restored both her body and her spirits. Cole, too, looked transformed after washing away the dust of their journey. He'd shaved and changed into clean clothes borrowed from one of the boarding house's male lodgers, and Victoria found herself stealing glances at him throughout the meal, admiring the strong line of his jaw and the way his still damp hair curled slightly at the nape of his neck. They were seated in the boarding house's private dining room, just the two of them, as Eleanor had tactfully given them space after serving the meal. The late afternoon sunlight slanted through the lace curtains, casting dappled patterns on the tablecloth. "You're staring," Cole noted, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth as he looked up from his plate. Victoria felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I'm sorry, it's just, you look different without the dust and without the grim expression and the gun in my hand," he suggested, his eyes twinkling with unexpected humor. She laughed softly, appreciating this lighter side of him. "Something like that, though I must say I'm grateful for both the expression and the gun when the situation called for it." Cole's smile faded slightly, his expression growing more serious. "Victoria, about what happens next. I want you to stay here at the boarding house. It's safer." "While you do what exactly?" she challenged, though she already knew the answer. He met her gaze directly, not bothering to dissemble. "I'm going to find Silas Larson. End this, once and for all. And then I'm going to find out where the Millers are being held and bring them home. And you expect me to just wait here, twiddling my thumbs?" Victoria set down her fork with a decisive click. "I think not, Cole Prescott." "I'm coming with you." Cole's eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed in concern. "Absolutely not. It's too dangerous. Silas Larson is not a man to be trifled with." "Neither am I," Victoria countered, her chin lifting in determination. "Or have you forgotten how I helped fight off the Larsons at the Line Shack?" "I haven't forgotten," Cole said softly, his expression softening. "You were remarkable, but this is different. Silas is. He's a killer, Victoria, cold-blooded and calculating. I can't risk you getting caught in the crossfire." Victoria reached across the table, impulsively placing her hand over his. "Cole, in the past 2 days, I've survived a stagecoach robbery, a shootout, and a storm. I've ridden across the desert, fought off bandits, and still managed to secure my teaching position. I think I've proven I can handle myself in difficult situations." Cole turned his hand beneath hers, their fingers intertwining in a gesture that felt both natural and startlingly intimate. "You have," he acknowledged, his thumb tracing small circles on her palm that sent shivers up her arm. "You're the most courageous woman I've ever met, but that doesn't mean I want to see you in danger. And I don't want to see you face Silas Larson alone," Victoria countered, her voice softening. "Cole, whatever this is between us, it's too new, too precious to risk losing. At least let me be nearby, please." Cole studied her for a long moment, something shifting in his blue eyes. When he finally spoke, his voice was husky with emotion. "You feel it too, then, this connection?" Victoria nodded, her heart pounding. "From the moment you reached down from your horse and said climb up. It sounds foolish. I know we've only known each other 2 days. It's not foolish," Cole interrupted, his fingers tightening around hers. "Or if it is, then we're both fools." "Because I felt it too, Victoria. Still do." The admission hung between them, changing the air in the room, making it thick with possibility. Victoria found herself leaning forward, drawn to him by a force as inexorable as gravity. Cole's free hand came up to cup her cheek, his touch gentle as a whisper. "If we're going to do this face Sela's together, then there's something I need to do first." "What's that?" Victoria whispered, hardly daring to breathe as he leaned closer. "This," he murmured, and then his lips were on hers, warm and firm and achingly tender. The kiss was brief but profound, a promise and a pledge wrapped in a moment of stolen sweetness. When Cole pulled back, his eyes were dark with emotion, searching her face as if memorizing every detail. "Now," he said softly, "if anything happens to me, at least I won't have the regret of never having kissed you." Victoria's heart swelled with feelings too complex and overwhelming to name. "Nothing is going to happen to you," she said fiercely. "We're going to find Silas Larson and the Millers, and then we'll figure out what comes next, together." Cole smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his face and made him look younger, less burdened by the weight of his past. "Together," he agreed. "I like the sound of that." The Silver Spur Saloon was exactly what Victoria had expected of a frontier town establishment: loud, smoky, and filled with men in various stages of intoxication. What she hadn't expected was to be walking through its swinging doors on Cole's arm, dressed in a borrowed gown of Alina's that was far finer than anything Victoria had ever owned. "Are you sure about this plan?" she whispered, acutely aware of the eyes that turned their way as they entered. "It seems awfully public." Cole's hand covered hers where it rested on his arm, a reassuring pressure. "That's the point. Silas Larson thinks he has the upper hand. He's expecting me to come skulking in, looking for revenge. The last thing he'll expect is for me to walk in openly with a beautiful woman on my arm." Victoria felt her cheeks warm at the compliment, even as she processed the logic of his strategy. "And Samuel, where does he fit in?" "Samuel's our insurance," Cole murmured, nodding discreetly toward a corner of the saloon where Samuel sat, seemingly engrossed in a card game but with a clear line of sight to the entire room. "If things go south, he'll make sure you get out safely." Victoria wanted to protest that she could take care of herself, but she held her tongue. This was Cole's territory, his battle. She had insisted on being part of it, but she respected his experience enough to follow his lead. They made their way to the bar, Cole ordering whiskey for himself and a lemonade for Victoria. The bartender, a burly man with a scar bisecting one eyebrow, served them with a curious glance but no comment. "Now what?" Victoria asked, sipping her surprisingly tart lemonade. "Now we wait," Cole replied, his eyes scanning the room with practiced casualness. "Silas will have noticed us by now. He'll make his move when he's ready." They didn't have to wait long. A hush fell over the saloon as a man descended the staircase from the upper floor. He was tall and lean, with iron-gray hair and a neatly trimmed beard. His clothes were expensive but understated, and he moved with the confident grace of a man accustomed to commanding respect or fear. "Silas Larson," Cole murmured, his body tensing beside Victoria's though his expression remained neutral. "Right on cue." Silas crossed the room with unhurried steps, his cold eyes fixed on Cole. He stopped a few paces away, close enough for conversation but far enough to be out of immediate reach. "Prescott," he said, his voice cultured and surprisingly soft. "I heard you were in town. Can't say I'm surprised. You always were predictable." Cole's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Silas, you're looking well. Prison life must agree with you." A flash of anger crossed Silas's face before he mastered it. "A minor inconvenience. As you can see, it didn't last." His gaze shifted to Victoria, assessing her with a coldness that made her skin crawl. "And who might this lovely creature be?" Before Cole could answer, Victoria extended her hand, summoning every ounce of poise her father had instilled in her. "Victoria Newman, I'm the new school teacher in Tanapa. Silas raised an eyebrow, taking her hand and brushing his lips across her knuckles in a gesture that made Victoria want to wipe her skin clean. A school teacher? How? Unexpected. And what is a respectable school teacher doing in the company of a known vigilante? Mr. Prescott saved my life when your men attacked the stagecoach, Victoria replied, her voice steady despite the way her heart raced. I consider myself fortunate to be in his company. Silas's eyes narrowed slightly. Ah, yes, the stagecoach, an unfortunate incident my men can be. Overzealous in their duties. Duties? Cole's voice was dangerously quiet. Is that what you call robbery and murder these days? Silas smiled thinly. Business, Prescott, simply business. This territory is ripe with opportunity for those bold enough to seize it. Where are the Millers? Victoria asked abruptly, unable to contain the question any longer. Silas turned his cold gaze back to her, something calculating in his expression. The elderly couple from the stage. They're quite safe, I assure you. Guests of mine, you might say. Hostages, you mean, Cole corrected, his hand coming to rest on Victoria's waist in a protective gesture that didn't go unnoticed by Silas. A crude term, but essentially accurate. Silas glanced around the saloon, which had grown oddly quiet, the patrons pretending not to watch the confrontation while missing nothing. Perhaps we should continue this conversation somewhere more private. My office, upstairs. Cole's fingers tightened slightly on Victoria's waist. Lead the way. But just so we're clear, Silas, if this is a trap, you won't walk away from it. Silas spread his hands in a gesture of innocence. No trap, Prescott, just a business proposition, one that might benefit us both. He turned and began ascending the stairs, clearly expecting them to follow. Victoria exchanged a look with Cole, who gave a barely perceptible nod toward Samuel. The older man acknowledged the signal with a slight tip of his head, rising casually from his card game and positioning himself near the foot of the stairs. Ready, Cole murmured, his eyes searching Victoria's. She took a deep breath and nodded. Ready. Silas Larson's office was as refined as the man himself, leather-bound books lining shelves, a Persian carpet underfoot, and a massive desk of polished mahogany dominating the space. He gestured for them to take the chairs opposite his desk while he settled into his own high-backed leather seat. Whiskey, he offered, already pouring himself a generous measure from a crystal decanter. No, Cole said flatly, his posture tense but controlled. Let's get to the point, Silas. Where are the Millers and what's your price for their release? Silas swirled the amber liquid in his glass, studying it as if it contained profound secrets. Direct as always, Prescott. Very well. The Millers are being held at a cabin about 10 miles east of town. They are unharmed and will remain so, provided certain conditions are met. What conditions? Victoria asked, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. Silas's cold eyes fixed on her, then shifted to Cole. First, the immediate release of my brother Jeb. Second, compensation for the men I lost due to your interference. Say $5,000. And third, he paused, a small smile playing at his lips, your word, Prescott, that you'll leave the territory and never return. Cole's face remained impassive, though Victoria could feel the tension radiating from him. That's quite a list of demands. The Millers are quite valuable hostages, Silas countered smoothly. The old man's daughter is well regarded in Tanapa. I imagine the mining company would pay handsomely to see them safely returned. And if we refuse? Victoria asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Silas shrugged, the gesture elegant and chilling. Then I'm afraid the Millers' continued good health cannot be guaranteed. This is a harsh land, Miss Newman. Accidents happen. Victoria felt Cole tense beside her, saw his fingers twitch toward the gun concealed beneath his coat. She placed her hand on his arm, a gentle pressure that communicated caution. "We need time to consider your terms," she said, meeting Silas's gaze directly. "The release of Jeb Larson will require the marshal's cooperation, and $5,000 is not a sum easily assembled." Silas studied her with newfound interest, as if reassessing her role in the confrontation. "You surprise me, Miss Newman. I wouldn't have expected such practicality from a school teacher." "There's a great deal about me that might surprise you, Mr. Larson," Victoria replied coolly, "including my determination to see the Millers safely return to their daughter." A thin smile curved Silas's lips. "Very well. You have until noon tomorrow. After that, I'm afraid the terms will change and not in your favor." Cole rose abruptly, his patience clearly at an end. "We'll be back with our answer. But understand this, Silas, if any harm comes to the Millers, there won't be a hole deep enough for you to hide in." Silas's smile didn't falter. "Always the hero, aren't you, Prescott? Just like your sister." She had that same righteous indignation in her eyes when she tried to stop my men in Virginia City. His voice hardened. "It didn't serve her well then. It won't serve you well now." Victoria felt rather than saw the change in Cole a stillness that was somehow more dangerous than any overt show of anger. She stood quickly, taking his arm. "We should go," she murmured, fear for him eclipsing her own trepidation. For a moment she thought he might refuse, might draw his gun and end the standoff then and there. But then he blinked, and whatever deadly calculation had been running through his mind seemed to recede. He nodded once, allowing her to guide him toward the door. "Noon tomorrow," Silas called after them, his voice laced with smug satisfaction. "Don't be late." They descended the stairs in silence, Victoria acutely aware of the curious glances from the saloon patrons. Samuel fell into step beside them as they exited, the three of them making their way back toward the boarding house without speaking until they were well clear of the Silver Spur. "Well," Samuel finally asked, his gruff voice pitched low. "What's the verdict?" Cole's expression was grim. "Silas has the Millers in a cabin east of town. Wants Jeb released, $5,000, and me out of the territory in exchange for their safe return." Samuel whistled softly. "Steep terms. You planning to meet them?" "No," Cole said flatly. "I'm planning to get the Millers out tonight before Silas has a chance to move them or worse." Victoria's heart skipped a beat. "Tonight? But how? We don't even know exactly where they're being held." Cole glanced down at her, his expression softening slightly. "I have a pretty good idea. There's an old trapper's cabin in that direction, isolated, defensible. It's where I'd keep hostages if I were Silas." "Even if you're right about the location," Samuel pointed out, "there'll be guards. Silas isn't stupid. He'll have the place well protected." "I'm counting on it," Cole replied, a hint of something dangerous in his voice. "Which is why I need you to create a distraction, Samuel. Something big enough to draw off at least some of the guards." Samuel nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his weathered face. "And while they're busy with whatever havoc I'm wreaking, you slip in and get the Millers out. Not a bad plan, assuming it works." "It will work," Cole said with quiet confidence. He turned to Victoria, his expression grave. "This is where you stay behind. I mean it this time, Victoria. What Samuel and I are about to do is too dangerous." Victoria started to protest, but Cole placed a finger gently against her lips, silencing her. "Please. I need to know you're safe. If something happens to me, the Millers will still need someone to look after them. And I need someone to come back to." The simple admission, spoken so quietly that only she could hear, made Victoria's objections die in her throat. The vulnerability in Cole's eyes, the raw honesty of his words, touched her more deeply than any grand declaration could have. "All right," she conceded softly, "but you had better come back to me, Cole Prescott. Do you understand?" A smile touched his lips, warming his eyes. "Yes, madam, I understand perfectly." They returned to the boarding house to find Alina pacing anxiously in the parlor. She looked up as they entered, hope and fear warring in her face. "Did you find them?" "My parents?" Cole stepped forward, taking Alina's trembling hands in his. "We know where they are, and we're going to bring them home tonight." As Cole and Samuel prepared for their rescue mission, gathering supplies and discussing strategy in low voices, Victoria found herself drawn to the window of the boarding house parlor, watching as the sun dipped toward the western horizon. The thought of Cole riding into danger twisted her stomach into knots, but she understood why he had to go. This wasn't just about the Millers anymore, or even about his sister. It was about ending a cycle of violence that had shadowed him for years. "He's a good man," Alina said quietly, coming to stand beside Victoria at the window. "I can see why you care for him." Victoria turned, startled by the perceptiveness of the observation. "Is it that obvious?" Alina smiled gently. "Only to someone who's known love herself." "The way you look at him. It's how I used to look at my Henry." Victoria felt heat rise to her cheeks. "It's all happened so quickly. 2 days ago, I didn't even know him." "Some connections don't need time," Alina replied, her voice tinged with the wisdom of experience. "My Henry proposed 3 days after we met. Said he knew the moment he laid eyes on me that I was the one he wanted to spend his life with." Her smile turned wistful. "We had 12 good years together before the mine took him. Not enough, but I wouldn't trade a single day of it." Victoria's heart ached for the other woman's loss, even as Alina's words resonated with her own feelings for Cole. Was it possible to know so quickly, so certainly, that someone was meant to be part of your life? The parlor door opened, and Cole entered, now dressed once more in his own clothes, his gun belt strapped securely around his waist. He looked every inch the frontiersman, capable and determined. "We're ready," he announced, his eyes finding Victoria's across the room. "Samuel's gone ahead to scout the area. I'll join him within the hour." Alina crossed to him, impulsively taking his hands in hers. "Bring them home safe, Mr. Prescott, please." Cole nodded solemnly. "You have my word, Mrs. Miller." Alina squeezed his hands once more, then tactfully withdrew from the parlor, closing the door softly behind her to give them privacy. Victoria moved toward Cole, her heart pounding with emotions too complex to name. "I should be going with you," she said, though the protest lacked conviction. "I don't like the thought of waiting here, not knowing if you're safe." Cole closed the distance between them, his hands coming up to frame her face with gentle reverence. "I know, but I need you here, Victoria, not just for your safety but for my peace of mind, knowing you're safe. It gives me something to fight for, something to come back to." Victoria placed her hands over his, leaning into his touch. "Then come back, promise me." "I promise," he whispered, his blue eyes intent on hers. "We have too much left unfinished for me not to return." And then he was kissing her, his lips claiming hers with a passion that stole her breath. This was different from their first kiss, deeper, more urgent, a declaration and a promise wrapped in heat and need. Victoria responded in kind, her arms winding around his neck, her body pressing against his as if she could somehow keep him with her through the sheer force of her embrace. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard, and Victoria could feel the rapid beat of Cole's heart beneath her palm. "I should go," he said reluctantly, though he made no move to release her. "Samuel will be waiting." Victoria nodded, summoning her courage. "Go. Bring the Millers home." She forced a smile, trying for lightness. "And then perhaps we can discuss this unfinished business between us." Cole's answering smile was warm with promise. "Count on it, Schoolmarm Newman, count on it." With one last, swift kiss, he was gone, slipping out the door and into the gathering dusk. Victoria watched from the window as he mounted his horse and rode away, her hand pressed to lips that still tingled from his kiss, her heart heavy with both fear and hope. The night stretched endlessly before her, each minute crawling by with excruciating slowness. Victoria paced the parlor, attempted to read, even tried to distract herself by planning lessons for her future students. Nothing worked. Her mind remained fixed on Cole, imagining him riding through the darkness toward danger. Elena proved to be a steadying presence, her own anxiety for her parents channeled into practical activity. She baked bread, prepared rooms for her parents' return, and brewed endless pots of coffee that she and Victoria sipped as they kept their vigil. "Tell me about him," Elena said softly as they sat before the fire in the early hours of the morning. "About Cole Prescott." Victoria hesitated, realizing how little she actually knew about the man who had come to mean so much to her in such a short time. "He fought in the Civil War," she began, recalling what Cole had shared. "Union cavalry. Afterward, he came west, worked as a scout for the army. His sister was killed by the Larson gang 5 years ago during a bank robbery. That's why he's so determined to bring Silas Larson to justice. Revenge is a heavy burden to carry for so long," Elena observed. "It changes a person." Victoria nodded, thinking of the shadows she sometimes glimpsed in Cole's eyes. "I think it has changed him, but there's more to him than that, a gentleness, a sense of honor. He could have left me to my fate when the stagecoach was robbed, but he didn't. He risked his life for a complete stranger." Elena smiled knowingly, and in doing so, found something worth more than revenge. Before Victoria could respond, the sound of approaching horses broke the pre-dawn stillness. Both women were on their feet instantly, rushing to the window. In the gray light of early morning, Victoria could make out 3 riders approaching Cole, Samuel, and between them, a slight figure that could only be Martha Miller. "They're back," Elena cried, already hurrying toward the door. "But where's Papa?" Victoria followed, her heart racing with both relief and renewed concern. Cole dismounted quickly, helping Martha down from his horse. The elderly woman looked exhausted but unharmed, her face lighting up at the sight of her daughter. "Elena." Martha embraced her daughter fiercely, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. "Oh, my dear girl." Victoria's eyes found Cole's over the reuniting family members. He looked tired, a streak of dirt across one cheekbone, but otherwise unharmed. The relief that flooded through her was so intense it made her knees weak. "Where's Jacob?" she asked, noting the absence of the elderly man who had given her his pocket watch with such solemn purpose. Cole's expression grew grim. "Silas moved him." By the time we got there, they'd already taken him to another location. Martha was being held separately. Elena looked up from embracing her mother, fear returning to her eyes. "What does this mean? Is Papa?" "He's alive," Samuel assured her quickly. "The guard we questioned was quite clear on that point. Silas is keeping Jacob as insurance, making sure we still show up at noon with his demands met." Martha clutched her daughter's hand. "They treated us decently enough, but Jacob's health isn't strong. His heart, the strain of all this." Her voice broke. "We have to get him back quickly." Cole stepped forward, his expression resolute. "And we will, Mrs. Miller. I gave you my word and I intend to keep it. Silas Larson has played his hand, but he doesn't know we've already freed Martha. That gives us an advantage. What's your plan?" Victoria asked, moving to stand beside him, needing to be close. Cole glanced down at her, a softness entering his eyes despite the gravity of the situation. "Silas is expecting us at noon at the Silver Spur. He thinks he holds all the cards. We're going to show him how wrong he is." As Martha was settled into her room with Aliner's careful attention, Cole, Samuel, and Victoria gathered in the parlor to discuss their strategy. The sun had fully risen now, bringing with it the increasing bustle of Tanapa awakening to a new day. "Silas will be suspicious when we arrive without Jeb," Samuel pointed out, pouring himself a cup of the strong coffee Aliner had left for them. "Marshal Henley made it clear he's not releasing him, no matter what." "That's what I'm counting on," Cole replied, pacing the room with restless energy despite his obvious fatigue. "Silas already expects resistance on that point. He'll be prepared to negotiate." Victoria watched him, noting the intensity in his eyes, the way his mind was clearly working through contingencies. "And the $5,000. We certainly don't have that." Cole paused in his pacing, a grim smile touching his lips. "No, but Hargrove does, or rather the mining company does. I spoke with him last night before we left. He's agreed to provide the money on the condition that Silas Larson is brought to justice and his gang dismantled." "Hargrove's a businessman," Samuel commented. "What does he care about justice?" "He cares about the Stagecoach route staying open and his silver shipments moving safely," Cole corrected. "Silas has been cutting into his profits for too long. It's a practical alliance, not a moral one." Victoria considered this, turning the plan over in her mind. "So we meet Silas at noon, offer him the money but not Jeb, and then what? He still has Jacob and he'll know we're holding something back." Cole's expression turned resolute. "That's where you come in, Victoria. You're going to be our distraction." "Me?" Victoria straightened, both surprised and oddly pleased by this development. "What exactly did you have in mind?" As Cole outlined his plan, Victoria felt a mixture of trepidation and determination growing within her. It was dangerous, yes, but it was also their best chance of rescuing Jacob and ending Silas Larson's reign of terror once and for all. "It could work," Samuel said when Cole had finished explaining. "But a lot has to go right, and Silas isn't a fool. He'll be suspicious." "That's why it has to be Victoria," Cole insisted, his eyes never leaving hers. "He's already dismissed her as just a schoolteacher, someone not worth watching closely. That's his mistake, and we're going to make him pay for it." Victoria held Cole's gaze, seeing the confidence he had in her reflected there. "I can do this," she said firmly, making her decision. "For Jacob, for your sister, and for everyone else who suffered because of Silas Larson." Cole crossed to her, taking her hands in his. "It will be dangerous," he warned, his voice low and serious. "If anything goes wrong, it won't," Victoria interrupted, squeezing his hands. "I trust you, Cole, and I trust us together. We can do this." Something fierce and tender flashed in Cole's eyes. Without warning, he pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly against him as if trying to memorize the feel of her. Victoria returned the embrace with equal fervor, drawing strength from his solid warmth. "I should have waited to meet you until after all this was over," he murmured against her hair. "Should have courted you properly, without dragging you into danger." Victoria pulled back just enough to look up at him, her lips curving in a small smile. "And miss all this excitement?" "I think not, Mr. Prescott." Her smile faded, replaced by a more serious expression. "Besides, I believe some things happen exactly when and how they're meant to. The Stagecoach robbery, you finding me. Perhaps it was all leading to this moment, this chance to make things right." Cole studied her face, wonder and something deeper shining in his eyes. "You are a remarkable woman, Victoria Newman." She rose on her toes, pressing a swift, sweet kiss to his lips. "And don't you forget it. Now let's finalize this plan. We have a rescue to execute." The Silver Spur Saloon was considerably less crowded at noon than it had been the previous evening. the regular patrons replaced by a smattering of men nursing hangovers, and a few early card games in progress. Victoria entered alone as planned, dressed once more in a leaner's fine gown with her hair styled in an elegant arrangement that had taken nearly an hour to perfect. She drew the expected glances as she made her way to the bar, her heart pounding beneath her composed exterior. Every detail had to be perfect if Cole's plan was to succeed. "Lemonade, please," she requested of the bartender, who nodded in recognition from the previous night. "Meeting Prescott again?" he asked, sliding the drink toward her. Victoria allowed a small smile to touch her lips. "And Mr. Larson? Business to discuss, I understand." The bartender raised an eyebrow but made no further comment, moving away to serve another customer. Victoria sipped her lemonade slowly, her eyes carefully scanning the room. Samuel was already in position, engaged in the same card game as the night before. Cole would be entering through the back within minutes. Everything was proceeding according to plan. "Miss Newman." Victoria turned to find Silas Larson standing beside her, his appearance as immaculate as ever. She forced herself to smile, channeling every bit of composure she possessed. "Mr. Larson, right on time." His cold eyes assessed her, a hint of surprise evident in them. "I didn't expect you to come alone. Where is your protector?" "Mr. Prescott will be joining us shortly," Victoria replied smoothly. "He's securing the funds you requested. $5,000 is a significant sum to transport safely." Silas's expression remained skeptical. "And my brother, has the marshal been persuaded to release him?" Victoria took another sip of her lemonade, stalling for the time Cole had specified. "That's one of the matters Mr. Prescott wishes to discuss. Perhaps we should move to your office." Silas studied her for a moment longer, calculation evident in his gaze. Finally, he nodded, gesturing toward the stairs. "After you, Miss Newman." As they ascended the stairs, Victoria's mind raced through the plan once more. Timing was everything. Cole would be entering Silas's office through the window that overlooked the back alley, using the distraction Samuel was about to provide. Her job was to keep Silas talking, to position him with his back to the window, and most importantly, to disarm him at the crucial moment. Silas's office was as she remembered it, opulent and meticulously arranged. He closed the door behind them, then moved to pour himself a drink from the crystal decanter. "Whiskey," he offered, more out of formality than genuine hospitality. "No, thank you." Victoria moved to the window, ostensibly admiring the view but actually checking for any sign of Cole in the alley below. "It's a remarkable town, Tonopah. So much potential." "Indeed," Silas agreed, taking a seat behind his desk. "Silver has a way of transforming landscapes and fortunes alike." "I intend to be part of that transformation." Victoria turned to face him, carefully positioning herself so that his attention remained fixed on her and away from the window. "Through stagecoach robbery and extortion. That seems a limited vision, Mr. Larson." A flash of irritation crossed Silas's face. "You're very outspoken for a schoolteacher, Miss Newman." "I believe education involves speaking truth, however uncomfortable," Victoria replied, moving closer to his desk. "And the truth is, your business model is ultimately unsustainable. The mining company has already hired additional security for their shipments. The stagecoach routes are being rerouted or given armed escorts. Your opportunities are diminishing daily." Silas's eyes narrowed, but before he could respond, a tremendous crash sounded from the saloon below, followed by shouts and the distinctive sound of breaking glass. Samuel's distraction was right on schedule. "What the devil?" Silas rose half out of his chair, his attention momentarily diverted. It was the opportunity Victoria had been waiting for. With swift, decisive movements. She reached across the desk and grabbed the pistol Silas had left lying there, pointing it directly at him just as the window behind him swung open to reveal Cole, his own gun drawn. "Don't move, Silas," Cole commanded, his voice cold with authority. "It's over." Silas froze, his face a mask of controlled fury as he realized the trap he'd walked into. "Prescott, I should have known." His gaze shifted to Victoria, reassessing her with new respect and hatred. "And you? Not just a schoolteacher after all." "No," Victoria agreed, holding the pistol with steady hands. "Not just a schoolteacher." Cole climbed through the window, never lowering his weapon. "Where's Jacob Miller, Silas? And don't bother lying." "We already freed Martha, and your men were quite informative before they retired from your employment." A muscle ticked in Silas's jaw, the only sign that this news disturbed him. "Miller is secure. He'll remain that way until I have my brother and the money." "Your brother stays in jail," Cole stated flatly. "As for the money—" He reached into his coat with his free hand, tossing a small canvas bag onto the desk. It landed with a heavy thud, coins clinking inside. $5,000 as requested. Now where is Jacob Miller? Silas eyed the bag, clearly torn between greed and suspicion. "How do I know that's the full amount?" "Count it if you like," Victoria suggested, her voice steady despite the tension thrumming through her. "Though I suspect the disturbance downstairs might require your attention before you finish." As if on cue, more crashes and shouts echoed from below, accompanied by the distinctive sound of Marshal Henley's voice ordering everyone to stand down. Silas's expression darkened as he realized the extent of the trap. "You brought the marshal into this. That was a mistake, Prescott." "Henley works for me." "Not anymore," Cole replied with grim satisfaction. "Turns out the mining company pays better, and they're not fond of having their stagecoaches robbed or their silver shipments hijacked. Now, for the last time, where is Jacob Miller?" Silas's eyes darted between them, calculating his options. Victoria could almost see the moment he decided to play his final card. "Miller is at my ranch, about 5 miles west of town. But you're too late." A cold smile curved his lips. "I gave orders that if I didn't return by 2 o'clock they were to kill him. It's nearly 1 now. Even if you left immediately, you'd never make it in time." Victoria felt a chill at his words, but she kept her gun steady. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Silas leaned back, seeming almost relaxed despite the weapons trained on him. "Are you willing to take that chance, Miss Newman? With an old man's life?" Footsteps sounded on the stairs, heavy and purposeful. The office door swung open to reveal Marshal Henley, flanked by 2 deputies. Behind them stood Samuel, a satisfied grin on his weathered face. "Marshal," Cole acknowledged without taking his eyes off Silas. "Perfect timing. We were just discussing Jacob Miller's whereabouts. Seems he's being held at Larson's ranch with orders to kill him at 2 o'clock. Henley's gaze traveled between Cole, Victoria, and Silas, assessing the situation with professional detachment. "That true, Larson?" Silas's expression remained composed. "What I do with trespassers on my property is my business, Marshal. The old man wandered onto my land. My men are simply detaining him until I can sort the matter out." "That's not how Martha Miller tells it," Samuel spoke up, his voice gruff with anger. "She says you kidnapped her and her husband from the stagecoach at gunpoint. That's robbery and kidnapping, Larson, hanging offenses in this territory." A flicker of unease crossed Silas's face, quickly masked. "The word of an old woman against mine. I think we all know how that would play out in court." "Maybe so," Henley conceded, "but I'm more interested in what your brother Jeb has to say. He's been quite talkative this morning. Seems he doesn't fancy the idea of hanging alone." For the first time, genuine alarm showed in Silas's eyes. Jeb wouldn't turn on family. He knows better. Does he? Cole asked softly. He knows you left him to rot in jail while you stayed comfortable in your fancy office. He knows you're perfectly willing to sacrifice him to save yourself. Why would he protect you? Silas's carefully constructed facade began to crack, desperation seeping through. This is absurd. You have no proof of anything. It's all hearsay and the word of criminals trying to save their own necks. We have enough, Henley stated firmly. Silas Larson, you're under arrest for the robbery of the Tonopah Stagecoach, the kidnapping of Jacob and Martha Miller, and he glanced at Cole. The murder of Celia Prescott Davis in Virginia City 5 years ago. Victoria watched as the color drained from Silas's face. For a moment, she thought he might surrender peacefully. Then, with a speed that belied his refined appearance, he lunged toward the desk drawer. Gun, Cole shouted, moving to place himself between Silas and Victoria. The next few seconds passed in a blur of motion and sound. Silas pulled a derringer from the drawer, firing wildly. Cole returned fire, his shot precise and devastating. Marshal Henley and his deputies drew their weapons, adding to the chaos. When the smoke cleared, Silas Larson lay slumped across his desk, blood pooling beneath him. The derringer had fallen from his lifeless fingers, a final desperate gambit that had cost him everything. Victoria stood frozen, the pistol she'd taken from Silas still clutched in her trembling hands. Cole gently removed it, setting it aside before gathering her into his arms. It's over, he murmured against her hair. He can't hurt anyone else ever again. Victoria clung to him, the reality of what had just happened washing over her in waves. They had confronted a killer, risked their lives, and emerged victorious. But the cost? Jacob, she remembered suddenly, pulling back to look up at Cole with urgent eyes. We have to get to the ranch. If Silas wasn't bluffing, he wasn't, Cole confirmed grimly. Silas Larson rarely bluffed. Marshal, we need men fast. Jacob Miller's life depends on it. Henley nodded sharply. Already on it. Got a posse assembled downstairs. We can be at Larson's ranch in 30 minutes if we ride hard. Then let's not waste another minute, Cole said, taking Victoria's hand firmly in his. We have an old man to save. The ride to Silas Larson's ranch was a blur of dust and urgency, hooves pounding across the Nevada landscape with desperate speed. Victoria rode behind Cole, her arms wrapped tightly around his waist, her heart racing with fear for Jacob Miller and determination to reach him in time. The posse consisting of Marshal Henley, his deputies, Samuel, and several townsmen who had volunteered spread out as they approached the sprawling ranch house. It was an imposing structure, 2 stories of stone and timber with several outbuildings scattered across the property. The old man's likely in the bunkhouse, one of the deputies suggested, pointing to a long, low building some distance from the main house. That's where Larson usually kept guests. Cole nodded grimly, steering his horse toward the indicated building. Victoria, stay back with Samuel. This could get ugly. But Victoria shook her head firmly. Jacob knows me. He'll be frightened, confused. He needs to see a familiar face. Though clearly reluctant, Cole recognized the logic in her argument. Stay behind me, he instructed, drawing his rifle as they dismounted. They approached cautiously, aware that Silas's men might already be carrying out their orders to eliminate Jacob. The bunkhouse appeared quiet, no movement visible through the dusty windows. Marshal Henley signaled his men to surround the building while he, Cole, and Victoria prepared to enter through the front door. On my count, Henley whispered, his hand on the door latch. 1, 2, 3, the door burst open, revealing a dimly lit interior with several bunks lining the walls. A man jumped up from a chair near the back, reaching for his gun, but Cole's rifle was already trained on him. "Don't," Cole warned, his voice hard. "Where's Jacob Miller?" The man, young, with a scraggly beard and nervous eyes, slowly raised his hands. "In the back room. But you're too late. Silas said 2 o'clock, and it's nearly that now. Jed's already in there with him." Victoria's heart lurched with fear. Without waiting for Cole or the marshal, she pushed past them, running toward the door at the rear of the bunkhouse. "Jacob," she called, praying she wasn't too late. "Jacob, it's Victoria Newman." She reached the door just as it swung open, revealing a burly man with a knife in his hand. Behind him, tied to a chair, sat Jacob Miller, his elderly face pale with exhaustion but his eyes widening with recognition at the sight of Victoria. "Miss Newman." Jacob's voice was weak but unmistakably relieved. The man, Jed, Victoria presumed, recovered quickly from his surprise. With a snarl, he lunged toward Victoria, the knife glinting in the dim light. Victoria reacted instinctively, ducking beneath his outstretched arm and driving her shoulder into his midsection. The impact knocked the wind from him, giving Cole the opening he needed. Cole's rifle butt connected solidly with Jed's temple, sending him crashing to the floor unconscious. "Nice move," Cole commented to Victoria, a hint of admiration in his voice despite the tension of the moment. Victoria was already at Jacob's side, untying the ropes that bound him to the chair. "Are you hurt? Did they harm you?" Jacob shook his head weakly. "Just tired, my dear." "And worried sick about Martha, is she?" "She's safe," Victoria assured him, helping him to his feet. "At your daughter's boarding house. She's waiting for you, Jacob." Tears welled in the old man's eyes. "Eleanor, my girl, she must have been so frightened." "She was," Cole confirmed, supporting Jacob's other side as they helped him from the room. "But she never lost faith that we'd bring you home, and now we will." Marshal Henley had secured the other man, and the bunkhouse was now fully under their control. Outside, the deputies had rounded up the remaining ranch hands, most of whom surrendered without resistance upon learning of Silas Larson's death. "It's over," Samuel said as he approached, relief evident in his weathered face. "Larson's gang is finished." Cole nodded, his arm still supporting Jacob. "And Celia can finally rest in peace," he murmured, so softly that only Victoria heard him. She squeezed his hand, understanding the weight that had been lifted from his shoulders. The return to Tonopah was considerably slower than their departure, mindful of Jacob's fragile condition. By the time they reached the boarding house, the sun was setting, painting the town in hues of gold and amber. Eleanor and Martha were waiting on the porch, their faces anxious until they caught sight of Jacob riding beside Cole. "Papa!" Eleanor cried, rushing down the steps as Cole helped Jacob dismount. The family reunion that followed brought tears to Victoria's eyes, Martha and Eleanor embracing Jacob, all three clinging to each other as if afraid to let go. Cole came to stand beside Victoria, watching the scene with a mixture of satisfaction and something deeper, more personal. "Worth it," he said quietly. "All of it worth this moment." Victoria leaned against him, suddenly exhausted now that the danger had passed. "Yes," she agreed, "though I think I've had enough adventure for a while." A smile touched Cole's lips as he looked down at her. "Does that mean you'll be settling into the quiet life of a schoolteacher now? No more gun battles and heroic rescues?" Victoria laughed softly. "That depends, I suppose." "On what?" Cole asked, turning to face her fully, his eyes intent on hers. "On whether a certain cowboy plans to stay in Tanapa," she replied, her heart pounding as she took this leap of faith. "Or if he's still planning to ride away once his mission is complete." Cole's expression softened, his hands coming up to frame her face with infinite tenderness. "That cowboy," he said softly, "has been riding too long without a home. He's thinking it might be time to put down roots. If there's someone worth staying for. Victoria's breath caught in her throat, hope blooming in her chest. And is there someone worth staying for? There's a schoolteacher, Cole murmured, his thumbs gently caressing her cheeks. Brave and beautiful and far too good for a worn-out cowboy like me. But if she'd have me, I'd like to court her properly. See where this connection between us might lead. I think, Victoria whispered, sliding her arms around his neck, that the schoolteacher would like that very much. Though I should warn you, she's developed a taste for adventure these past few days. You might have your hands full. Cole's laugh was warm and genuine, the sound of a man who had finally found his way home after a long journey. I'm counting on it, Victoria Newman. I'm counting on it. And as the sun set on Tonopah, casting long shadows across the dusty street, Cole Prescott kissed Victoria Newman with all the promise of new beginnings. The Stagecoach bandits had indeed left her in the dust, but in doing so, they had led her directly into the arms of the man she was meant to find. 2 years later, the schoolhouse bell rang out across Tanapa, signaling the end of another day of learning. Victoria Prescott stood in the doorway, watching as her students gathered their books and filed past her with cheerful goodbyes. In the 2 years since she had arrived in this once rough mining town, much had changed both in Tonopah and in her own life. The town had grown, silver prosperity bringing new businesses, more families, and a sense of permanence that had been lacking before. The schoolhouse where she taught had expanded to accommodate the increasing number of children, and just last month, the town council had approved funds for a proper library to be built adjacent to the school. But the most significant changes had been personal. Victoria smiled as she caught sight of her husband approaching across the schoolyard, their 6-month-old son cradled in his arms. Cole Prescott had indeed stayed in Tanapa, trading his life of wandering for the stability of a home and family. He now served as the town's deputy marshal, his experience and steady nature earning him the respect of the community. "There's my 2 favorite men," Victoria called as they drew closer. She stepped down from the schoolhouse porch to meet them, lifting little Thomas from Cole's arms and pressing a kiss to his chubby cheek. The baby gurgled happily, his blue eyes so like his father's bright with recognition. "And here's mine," Cole replied, leaning in to steal a quick kiss from his wife. "How were the students today?" Victoria shifted Thomas to her hip, smiling as she recalled the day's lessons. "Full of questions, as usual." "Billy Hargrove has decided he wants to be a geologist after the rock samples you brought in last week. And little Emma Miller recited her multiplication tables perfectly. Alina will be so proud." At the mention of Alina Miller, Cole's expression warmed. "Speaking of the Millers, I saw Jacob at the assay office today. Says he's feeling stronger than he has in years." Victoria nodded, pleased by this news. The elderly couple had recovered remarkably well from their ordeal with the Larson gang. Jacob's heart trouble had stabilized under the town doctor's care, and he and Martha had become fixtures in Tonopa's social circles, with Jacob even serving on the town council despite his advanced age. "Martha invited us for Sunday dinner," she told Cole as they began walking toward home, a cozy house not far from the school that they had purchased last year. "She's determined to fatten up Thomas." Cole laughed, a sound that still made Victoria's heart flutter even after 2 years of marriage. "At the rate he's growing, I'm not sure he needs the help. He'll be riding his own horse before we know it." "Don't rush him," Victoria protested, though she smiled at the image. "He's only just started sitting up on his own." They walked in comfortable silence for a moment, enjoying the crisp autumn air and each other's company. Victoria marveled, as she often did, at the path her life had taken. When she'd boarded that stagecoach in Sacramento, heading for a teaching position in a frontier town she'd never seen, she could never have imagined the adventure and the love that awaited her. "Penny for your thoughts?" Cole asked, noticing her pensive expression. Victoria smiled up at him, adjusting Thomas on her hip. "I was just thinking about the day we met. The stagecoach robbery, you riding up like something out of a dime novel. Climb up, you said, and I did. Best decision I ever made." Cole's eyes softened with memory and emotion. "I knew there was something special about you from that first moment. Covered in dust, scared half to death, but still with that fire in your eyes." He took her free hand, threading his fingers through hers. "Never imagined where it would lead us, though. No regrets?" Victoria asked, though she already knew the answer. Cole stopped walking, turning to face her fully. With gentle hands, he cradled her face just as he had that first night in Tonopah, after they had rescued Jacob Miller and brought down Silas Larson's gang. "Not a single one," he assured her, his voice deep with sincerity. "You and Thomas are everything I never knew I needed, everything I never thought I deserved." Victoria leaned into his touch, love for this man overwhelming her. "I think we found exactly what we were meant to find in each other." Their lips met in a kiss that held all the tenderness of their shared history and all the promise of their future together. Thomas squirmed between them, demanding his share of attention, and they broke apart with soft laughter. As they continued toward home, Victoria reflected on the journey that had brought them here. The stagecoach bandits had indeed left her in the dust that fateful day, but in doing so, they had set her on the path to the greatest adventure of her life, a life shared with a cowboy who had turned back when others rode away, who had extended his hand and said those simple, life-changing words, "Climb up." And she had never looked back.